Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tapio Säävälä and I work for the European Commission for Adult Education Policies. Unfortunately, I cannot be there in Iceland with you today, but I hope that my short presentation on trends and challenges in education and training in Europe will give you an input for your discussions today. Let me start by our understanding of lifelong learning. We are believers in lifelong learning and we are also believers in life-wide learning. Since 2000 we have been promoting lifelong learning, which is basically learning from cradle to grave throughout your life from early childhood and you would continue learning after your retirement and as an older person. But we also think that life-wide learning is important. And what is life-wide learning? It means that we have formal learning, but we have non-formal learning. You take language courses, you take courses in arts, and we have informal learning. And we should see the life-wide and life-wide learning together. And for instance, if you look at the informal learning and the new technologies like ICT and Internet, most of the ICT skills young people today learn from peers informally. They don't need teachers for that. So that in a way changes the whole functioning of the education systems, because schools, for instance, they anymore cannot compete with all the knowledge and all the skills that are available in non-formal and informal learning, but they should make more like sense of all learning that young people nowadays do. Also, you can see in this picture that we can think of the quality of lifelong learning from different angles, and this is also important when we look at your topic, the prison education. We can look at the quality of learning from the individual perspective. Learning should be for personal fulfillment, it should be for social inclusion and active citizenship, and of course it should bring you to employment and support your career development. But we can also look at the education and training systems and the quality of them from the society's perspective. Of course there is this competitiveness of the societies, but there's also the idea of constructive democracy, active participation and active citizenship. We can look at the quality of lifelong learning also from the point of view of the employment and world of work. Since the world of work is rapidly changing, companies, enterprises and also public sectors need different kinds of skills, new skills and different kind of competencies. And the quality of the education and training systems is measured by how to what extent they can provide young people and adults with these skills and competencies. As I said, the world of work is changing, and in this picture you will see that the demand for higher skills, the jobs that require higher skills are increasing, something like from 20% to 30% up to 2020. But we can also see that the jobs requiring lower skills are diminishing. The number of those jobs are less and less. And at the same time, and this is important, we have to recognize the fact that also the skills required by low-skilled jobs are increasing. Increasingly, you need ICT skills, you need good reading and writing skills and mathematical skills and judgment, and this is still indeed a problem in Europe. But in the future we will of course have a lot of new opportunities. We will have more jobs in low-carbon industries, we will have more jobs in digital technologies, and as the European population is aging, we will have much more older people requiring different kind of care services and other services, and it is expected that these older people, they will be first of all healthier, they live longer, and they are wealthier, so they will require a lot of services. And of course the infrastructures that are changing, for instance due to energy saving requirements, require a lot of workforce. But nevertheless, we have to keep in mind that if we are to respond to these skills needs, we have to make sure that everyone in Europe has solid basic skills, reading, writing, ICT, but that they also have the key competencies, the ability to be creative, and the ability to innovate, and the ability to work with others. So it means that we need higher skills, but on the other hand, we need to make sure that skills are equitably provided to all of our citizens. So we need a broad skills base. One of the responses to this requirement is the 2006 recommendation on key competencies for lifelong learning. And here you will see a shift from only knowledge to skills and to attitudes. And this is a big change because we tended to teach in schools facts and figures, but now the emphasis is more on that kind of knowledge, on that kind of skills and attitudes that keeps you in learning throughout your life. And we see that key competencies are the competencies that really are for your personal fulfillment, your social inclusion and employment, and that they are all underpinned by creativity, problem solving, decision taking, and management of your own feelings. And on this basis, experts have defined 8 key competencies, and really the European Parliament and the Council have adopted a recommendation based on this work. What you see here is actually very interesting if you think of the traditional school education, traditional school subjects, and then these key competencies. Because only few of those competencies are related to traditional school subjects. If you look at digital competence, learning to learn competence, social and civic, sense of initiative and entrepreneurship, and cultural awareness and expression, they are so-called transversal or cross-curricular competencies that are not directly linked to any of the school subjects. The Commission last November published a communication that further emphasizes the need of these transversal key competencies and transversal skills for employability and for innovation and for competitiveness. And so they have been there in the EU agenda for almost a decade, but their importance is actually only increasing. These key competencies, of course, if you think of the traditional school education, it has a lot of implications to teaching and learning and also assessment. And again, if you think of traditional school assessment, what of these competencies are actually assessed by traditional school education? And we know that what is usually assessed will be taught and learned. So we have a question here. We have just published and we have worked with the Irish presidency on the assessment of these transversal key competencies. So how to assess and how to support young people, children and young people to develop their learning skills, their social and civic competencies and entrepreneurship, so that they also know what it is really about and how they are progressing in these areas. But these key competencies have, of course, a lot of implications to teachers and teaching profession in general. We know that the requirements for teachers are increasing, and they are many. They should be pedagogues, they should be specialists in their subjects, but increasingly they should be able to let young people to develop those transversal key competencies. And indeed they should be able to respond to individual needs of all students. But they should also be lifelong learners themselves. They should be autonomous learners, they should learn to use new technologies, they should be digitally literate, and we know from studies that this is one of the areas where teachers themselves would like to get more training, ICT. They should also be developers of the school as a learning environment, because increasingly these key competencies require a holistic approach to learning environments, and that students are supported in all aspects in the school environment. They are also increasingly managers, because the school leadership idea today is not that you have only one headmaster, but you are working in teachers are working in teams, they are working in groups, and teachers should be able to cope with this shared leadership, work with each other, and increasingly they should also be managers and leaders of the groups of students. And this again is something that teachers themselves feel that they should get more training. The third area where they feel that they should get more training is the special needs education, and how to deal with those children who have difficulties in learning and probably in their social development. So this was a kind of a short introduction to the issues that are related to schools. But let's move now to adult learning and see what challenges and opportunities we have there. Adult learning is usually seen as a whole range of formal, non-formal, informal learning activities. They can be general, they can be for personal purposes, but they can also be for professional purposes, undertaken by adults when they have left initial education and training. And since this is increasingly important for Europe and for every member state, the European ministers have agreed on a benchmark on participation in lifelong learning, or the participation of those 25 to 64 years old that they would participate in learning. And the benchmark, I feel, itself is rather modest, 15%, and at the moment the rate was only 9%. And there are, on top of that, big differences between countries. We have countries who have reached the benchmark with something like 30% of participation, and then we have countries with only 1 or 2% of participation. And we also know that the participation is not equal. The older you are, the less you get education. Here you can see the curve how participation in learning declines with age. We also know that the less you have initial education, the less you get further training. If you have a university degree, you are quite likely to get further training throughout your career, but if you have low skills at the beginning, you are less likely to get education, further training and education. And this is now a big challenge, especially if you think of the aging population and the size of the age cohorts retiring in Europe. One big issue related to this lack of education and training is, of course, the early school leaving. We have at the moment something like 6 million young people between 18 and 25 who have left school prematurely, probably only with upper secondary level qualification, but not anymore, not more education and training. And this is a huge challenge if you think of the future skills needs and then the opportunities for young people to catch up and get careers and employment. The ministers have agreed a comprehensive recommendation on how to tackle this issue. It starts with identification and analysis of the situation, and here we have some good examples like the Netherlands, who has a very good analysis and identification of the problem. They also have a very good monitoring of the situation, and also increasingly coordination of different policies. We can divide these measures to tackle early school leaving in prevention, intervention and compensation. Prevention starts, as we believe in lifelong learning, in early childhood education and care, and the question there is to what extent early childhood education and care systems can cater for those children who have disadvantaged background, to what extent they can work with their families, etc. There are, of course, a lot of other preventive measures at the system level, anti-discrimination, and here again the cooperation with housing, employment, etc. is very important. At the level of intervention, you can identify, for instance, at the school level, anti-bullying programs. You can make schools interesting and satisfying learning environments, and then you can identify different kind of student-focused measures like support for students by psychologists, social workers, special needs education teachers. Finally, you can have compensation measures, compensatory measures like second chance opportunities, the systems helping young people to re-enter in mainstream education, and indeed comprehensive support. And I think that your field, prison education, is very much related to this compensation, and we have a lot of good examples in Europe that you can study and you can learn from also from this side. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is this European Agenda for Adult Learning. So the previous slides were about the challenge, and the question is, of course, that what can we do? Again, the ministers have agreed a comprehensive agenda for adult learning in Europe up to 2020. And that has actually 5 different elements. One is to make mobility and lifelong learning a reality for all. We would like to increase the quality and efficiency of adult education and training, and here we have, for instance, 2 working groups working at the moment. One is looking at the quality of the provision, how providers are accredited, what kind of competence requirements there are for staff, and what kind of indicators you can create to measure the quality in adult learning. We have another working group looking at financing adult learning, so what kind of different financing and funding mechanisms can support also the low-skilled people to participate more in education and training and make sure that their skills are updated and upgraded. There's a lot of focus on equity, social cohesion and active citizenship. There's also a lot of support, mainly through the Grundtvig program on creativity and innovation in adult learning. The fifth issue here is actually one of the most important things, because in many countries we actually are still lacking a good monitoring system of the sector. And now, for instance, some of you may know the OECD PISA study, which will be measuring adult skills and competencies, reading, writing, those basic skills, but also competencies related to use of ICT and work with modern tools. So that will be a good stimulus for member states to look at the national situation and then improve the monitoring and analysis basis of adult learners. Some countries like France has now established a priority on literacy because they have had some national surveys on adult skills, and they have found out, for instance, that reading and writing is a true problem and that needs to be tackled. So let's go to the prison education, which is your topic. We just finished a survey on prison education in Europe. And indeed we have a huge number, 640,000 prisoners in the EU. And if you look at this pie chart here, you will see that only few of them are qualified to take to undertake higher education studies, and majority has no general secondary education qualification. And this is indeed a huge challenge. I actually just read an article written by Tom Schuller from the UK, and he said that in the UK, according to his studies, something like 1/3 of the prisoners had truancy problems in schools, and 40% of those prisoners performed quite critically in the reading test at the level 1 or below. And we know from national studies that many prisoners have left school early. There are different ways of providing education in prisons. A lot of emphasis is in general education, basic skills and key competencies, and providing second chance. A lot of emphasis is, of course, by definition on vocational education and training, on specific trades and on the job learning via prison work, but also a lot of emphasis on non-formal learning, arts and cultural activities, rehabilitation programs, skills for life, etc., financial literacy, parenting skills that are preparing prisoners to include easier in the society. But we have to say and keep in mind that according to this survey, if you look at the adult population in prisons, only 25% on the average participate in learning. And that is, of course, a big challenge for us. What are then the factors that would make prison education more effective and turn prisons into positive learning environments? Collaboration is key between authors and prisons and the society outside. We have also done quite a lot of studies, as I said before, on what kind of competencies teachers and trainers in the field of adult learning should have, and this is something that you could probably use when you look at this second bullet, which is about qualified teachers and trainers. The offer has to be broad because of the variety and diversity of different learners, and by definition it has to be very learner-centered. Finally, you will find a lot of more information in our website. So what I tried to do is to give a kind of overview of the EU level work in this field, and I was also asked to give some kind of questions for your discussions later today. And I think that overall in the field of education and training policies, cooperation between different ministries, between different authorities is becoming more and more important because of the holistic approach that we need to take to learning and education and training in general. So my question could be probably that how can you enhance the cooperation between different authorities when you know all the facts and figures that I have been presenting for you today? And my second question could be that how could you use the European tools? We have the recommendation on key competencies, we have the qualification framework, we have just published also a recommendation on validation of non-formal informal learning that I didn't have time to deal with today. But the question could be that how could you use the European tools to make the case for prison education and promote prison education in that context? So I would like to thank you for your attention, and I would like to wish you a very fruitful and successful conference. Thank you very much.